The river that day in 1989 offered a choice no man should ever have to make. Giles, known as Chito, a local fisherman with calloused hands and kind eyes, was used to the raw brutality of the Costa Rican wilderness. He was wading through the Sequoias River when he saw it. A massive, dying shape. A 17-foot crocodile shot in the head by a cattle rancher and left to perish in the mud. The sheer size of the reptile should have sent him running, but something in the glazed, suffering eyes of the predator stopped him. It wasn't a monster. It was a victim. It was a challenge to the world's natural order, a test of his own humanity. He knew the danger, the utter insanity of it all, yet he didn't hesitate. He took the impossible creature home. Now let's enter their world. If you're already enjoying this story, a quick like and share makes all the difference. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. The crocodile was not just large, he was colossal, a literal dinosaur brought back from the brink of extinction by the sheer will of one humble man. Chito named him Pocho, which translates loosely to strength or softness, a paradox that would come to define their relationship. The initial days were a relentless, harrowing blur of emergency triage. Chito spent long hours cleaning the festering, infected gunshot wound on Pocho's head. The injury wasn't just physical. The bullet had damaged the reptile's central nervous system, leaving him lethargic, unresponsive, and critically unable to hunt or even defend himself. He was a predator stripped of his core instinct. Chito, dedicating a section of his small property's pond to the giant, refused to leave his side. He would sleep nearby, a protective vigil against the jungle's smaller scavengers. The care was absolute, born less of logic and more of an inexplicable, deep-seated pity. He fed Pocho chicken and fish, which he had to physically mash and push into the massive jaws, a process fraught with peril, yet Pocho never clamped down. The fisherman would even tenderly massage the crocodile's flank, humming quiet, rhythmic songs, hoping to stimulate the circulation in the great wounded body. He worried constantly about the local laws, the neighbors, and the terrifying real possibility that his patient might one day simply revert to instinct and claim his life. For months, Chito never knew if Pocho would live. He was fighting a battle on two fronts, the battle for the animal's life and the battle against the pervasive fear that chilled his own community. It was an unbelievable commitment, a radical act of faith in a creature that society deemed nothing more than a threat. Pocho was healing slowly, painfully, but his recovery was incomplete. He was a survivor, yes, but he was also fundamentally changed. Not entirely wild, not yet entirely tame. He was suspended in a liminal space between two worlds. Chito knew he could never release the Wildheart, crocodile, back into the river system. The injury had left him too vulnerable, too reliant. Pocho's world, and Chito's, had just been permanently redefined. 7 years passed. 7 years of Chito bringing buckets of water, 7 years of preparing meals, 7 years of one man living side by side with the silent menace that was Pocho. The village eventually grew accustomed to the strange resident, treating the sight of the giant reptile less with fear and more with resigned curiosity. But 7 years is a long time for a relationship to remain one-sided. Chito felt an enduring, deep love for the creature he had saved, but Pocho remained, for all his docile behavior, an enigma, a beast whose loyalty could vanish with a flicker of instinct. There was no true, tangible bond, only dependence. Chito often spoke to him, pouring out his life's worries and simple joys, yet received only the silent, unblinking gaze of a cold-blooded survivor. Then, one hot afternoon, while Chito was wading into the water to scrub the large moss-covered rock near Pocho's head, something shifted. Chito was singing a soft folk tune, the one he always hummed, and as his hand brushed Pocho's snout, the massive crocodile did the unthinkable. Pocho slowly swam toward Chito, gently nuzzling his head against the fisherman's leg, like a domesticated pet seeking affection. The gesture was so deliberate, so tender, it defied every known law of zoology and predator behavior. It wasn't a snap or a threat, it was a connection. It was the first sign that the years of kindness, the daily ritual of unconditional care, had finally broken through the neurological damage and the ancient reptilian barrier. The hunter had recognized the healer. Chito was moved to tears. In that moment, the relationship transcended caregiving. It became a partnership. The change was profound, yet subtle, unfolding over the next several months. Pocho's nuzzles became a regular, sought-after occurrence. The fishermen started testing the boundaries of their connection, first with gentle touches, then with full, submerged interaction. He would swim alongside the massive crocodile, their bodies only inches apart, an unimaginable tableau of trust. Their shared world, the pond on Chito's land, became a daily stage for the impossible. Chito learned Pocho's quiet language, the soft, almost imperceptible flick of his tail that meant contentment, the slight tilt of his head that indicated curiosity. He would call Pocho's name, and the great reptile would lift his head from the water, his eyes fixed entirely on the man who had given him a second life. This was not a conditioned response, like that of a dolphin or a circus bear. This was a choice, a conscious and continuous decision by a colossal predator to suppress its nature for the sake of companionship. They swam together for hours. Chito would paddle on his back, using Pocho's side as a gentle buoy, sometimes even resting his head on the disha, animal's broad, scaly back. This daily ritual became the anchor of Chito's life. He began to see Pocho not just as a rescued animal, but as a family member, a true companion, the silent, enormous proof of his own capacity for unconditional love. This affection was returned in a primal yet recognizable way. When Chito was out of the water, Pocho would sometimes wait patiently by the bank, letting out soft, low rumbles that were less a warning and more a gentle, continuous query. Where are you? The bond wasn't forged in shared experience, but in shared vulnerability. Pocho was vulnerable due to his injury. Chito was vulnerable because he dared to trust a creature whose teeth could end his life in a second. This mutual, chosen vulnerability was the foundation. It was the kind of deep, wordless understanding that exists only between two souls who have looked into the abyss and chosen to step back together. Chito's wife, initially terrified, slowly grew to accept the reality of the giant pet, though she maintained a respectful distance. For Chito, there was never any fear, only an immense feeling of peace and belonging when he was in the water with his friend. He recognized that the gunshot wound had, in a tragic twist, provided the opening for this miracle. The brain damage had dulled the instinctual drive, yes, but the 7 years of consistent, loving care had then rewired the core emotional center. Pocho had imprinted on him, recognizing the man as the source of all safety, all warmth, all survival. He was the anchor, and Chito, swimming beside the prehistoric giant, felt more known than he ever had before. It was inevitable that their secret world would eventually break the surface of public awareness. Chito, realizing the profound depth of his unique relationship, felt a moral obligation to share their story, hoping to inspire a different kind of respect for wildlife. He began performing their synchronized swims for small gatherings, but the incredible nature of the act quickly drew bigger crowds. News reporters, conservationists, and skeptics began arriving from around the globe, eager to witness the impossible with their own eyes. For the fisherman and his crocodile, the pond became a public stage. The attention, however, brought immediate scrutiny and serious challenge. The local authorities, driven by safety concerns, initially tried to seize Pocho, They argued that a 17-foot crocodile, regardless of its disposition, represented an unacceptable public hazard and must be relocated to a facility or, worse, put down. Chito fought for his friend with the ferocity of a parent protecting a child. He presented irrefutable evidence, years of photo and video documentation, witness accounts, and most powerfully, the daily demonstration of their trust. He would wade into the water, call Pocho, and the giant reptile would respond, surfacing gracefully, allowing Chito to pet his snout, even ride him like a giant, scaly steed. The authorities relented, but the scientific community remained largely unconvinced, even hostile. Zoologists theorized that the brain damage had permanently tamed the crocodile, creating a kind of biological anomaly, not a true bond. They claimed it was a learned behavior, a dependence on the only food source, a simple survival mechanism masquerading as affection. These clinical explanations ignored the palpable emotional quality of the interaction, the gentle nuzzles, the clear, non-aggressive communication. Chito faced a continuous struggle to protect the integrity of their relationship from reductionist science and persistent public fear. During one particularly crowded performance, a sudden loud noise startled Pocho. The massive reptile thrashed violently for a terrifying moment, the water churning into a frenzy. The crowd gasped, expecting the worst, watching as Chito was momentarily submerged. But as quickly as the frenzy began, it subsided. Chito emerged, completely unharmed, and gently stroked Pocho's head, whispering to him until the giant was still again. It was a moment of true terror, and in its aftermath, the ultimate proof. Pocho's reflex had been momentary panic, but his underlying connection to Chito overrode his predatory instinct. He had every opportunity to snap, to revert to the wild, and yet he chose the man. The skeptics were silenced, if not converted. The bond was real, tested in fire, and its foundation was trust, stronger than instinct itself. As the years became decades, the physical toll began to show on both of them. Chito, the fisherman, grew older, his pace in the water slowing. Pocho, the ancient reptile, also began to move with a discernible weariness, his massive body less buoyant than before. Yet their daily swim continued, a stubborn, beautiful testament to a vow made without words. The two souls had become inextricably linked, their long shared existence a single, interwoven narrative. This final chapter was perhaps the most tender. Chito knew, with the quiet certainty of a man deeply attuned to nature, that their time was drawing short. He would spend extra moments massaging Pocho's snout, not just for comfort, but as a farewell of sorts. It was a silent acknowledgement that the laws of life and time, which they had defied for so long, were finally asserting themselves. One morning, Chito waded into the pond as usual, but Pocho did not surge forward with his customary enthusiasm. The crocodile lay half submerged, his powerful tail still, his eyes clouded. Chito knelt beside him, his calloused hand resting on the cool, armor-plated skin. He began to hum their song, the same soft, rhythmic tune he had sung decades ago while cleaning the bullet wound. Pocho responded with a faint guttural sound, a low, mournful rumble that Chito understood perfectly. It was a goodbye. Their final swim was a slow, deliberate circle in the center of the pond, less a performance and more a sacred rite. The bond was not broken, it was simply reaching its culmination. Chito held the giant's head, submerging his own face into the cooling water, embracing the friend who had changed his life and the world's perception of trust. There were no spectators, no cameras, just two souled companions honoring the end of an extraordinary journey. He stayed with Pocho until the very end, ensuring that his friend, who had entered the world of sanctuary through pain, would leave it surrounded by love. When Pocho passed away peacefully in 2011, the story did not end. It transformed into legend. The fisherman who risked everything for a broken creature gave the world an enduring, tangible symbol of the power of radical empathy. Chito, grieving but resolute, gave Pocho a funeral worthy of a beloved family member, attended by people from across the country. The crocodile's body was lovingly preserved and placed in a local museum, ensuring that his immense form and his even greater story would continue to inspire. The narrative of Chito and Pocho resonated because it challenged the most fundamental assumptions we hold about nature, instinct, and love itself. It forced us to confront the rigid boundaries we place between species, between what is safe and what is wild. It was more than a story of trust. It was a living demonstration that consistent kindness can rewrite the very coding of a heart, whether it beats in the chest of a man or a cold-blooded reptile. For Chito, the loss was immense, leaving a void where a 17-foot friend once lay. But he carries the quiet pride of having proven that the capacity for connection is universal, crossing the chasm of biology and instinct. Their 2 decades together stand as a monumental, unbelievable example that the deepest bonds are often found not in shared language, but in shared respect. The fisherman and the crocodile did not just survive. They thrived together, showing the world that sanctuary is not a place, but a relationship built on the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear day after day, year after year. Their tale will forever ripple through the quiet waters of the Siquirres River, a continuous, living echo of an impossible, beautiful friendship. This extraordinary, tender journey between Giles Chito and Pocho, 2 beings from completely different realms, ultimately offers a timeless, gentle lesson that the most monumental expressions of love are often quiet, unconventional, and require a trust that goes beyond what we are taught is possible. Their story is the soft, continuous whisper that reminds us to look deeper into the eyes of the creatures around us. For sometimes, the greatest wisdom about connection lies in the silent, ancient gaze of another soul. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to light. We have a question for you. What was the single moment in this story that resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.